When Vortex released the Strike Eagle 5-25, it quickly became the Mac Daddy in the $500 to $800 front focal plane category. It offered great image quality, a ton of internal elevation adjustment, and came with both a zero stop and an illuminated reticle. That scope, however, was probably a bit too feature-rich for most shooters. Enter the Venom. The Venom is the newest rifle scope from Vortex, and it's specifically targeting the quickly growing precision shooting world. And with its street price of around $500, surely will be on many shopping lists. In this video, we're looking at this brand new scope, discussing what you absolutely need to know, and we're doing it all in 8 minutes or less. Let's go. This scope has two things that I consider essential for precision rifle and long-range shooting: a front focal plane Christmas tree reticle. With a front focal plane reticle, the reticle gets bigger or smaller based on the magnification that you're on. More importantly, the reticle hash marks remain constant no matter the magnification. This means that you can effectively use your reticle to correct your shots, and then you can use the various holdover points in the scope to quickly make the adjustments without having to click in the adjustments. What I typically do is sight in the rifle for 100-yard zero and then use holdovers for both windage and elevation, unless I'm going to be shooting at extended long ranges and I need both, or will be shooting at one distance, in which case I will just dial in the elevation that I need to. The reticle on the scope is the popular EBR-7C reticle, which has become one of the industry favorites. The reticle has a combination of 0.1, 0.2, and half mil hash marks and a thin 0.04 millirad center dot. One of the reasons that this reticle is so popular is that it's not super thick at full magnification, and thanks to the 3 thick stadia lines on the outside, this reticle is completely usable on the low end of the magnification range. Ultimately, it goes back to your personal preference of how you shoot. The Vortex Venom has a 5-time magnification range and goes from 5 to 25 power. The magnification adjustment ring is quite smooth, however, it is so far a bit on the stiffer side. It takes around a half a turn to go from 5 to 25 power, which is consistent with competing scopes. The magnification ring itself is fairly wide, and it does have channels cut into it for grip. And while these grips are functional, Vortex includes a throw lever in the box, and I highly recommend that you use it. It makes magnification adjustment a lot easier in any shooting conditions. You will find similar beveling on the fast focus eyepiece, the 2 turrets, and the parallax adjustment. The fast focus eyepiece is also quite smooth to adjust, and this is what you use first to make sure that the reticle is in focus before you make any other adjustment. The parallax adjustment with the scope goes from just 15 yards all the way out to infinity, and it is also super smooth. By having it focused down to just 15 yards, this makes the scope suitable for rimfire and air guns and for precision short-range needs. One of the scopes that people will absolutely be comparing the Venom with is the Arken SH4 Gen 2, and that scope focuses down to just 25 yards rather than 15. In my experience, the focus aligned perfectly well with the indicated distance markings. Now, sometimes this is a point of concern, and why quite a few scope companies are going with no distant markings at all, such as what we saw on the excellent Burris RT25. Now, like we saw with the Vortex Strike Eagle, the Venom eye box is fairly forgiving, and you have right around 3.6 inches of eye relief. While the eye box is not super big, you should have absolutely no challenges to getting behind the scope, And comparing it with some other scopes at the range right here, the eye box here is actually better than those other scopes. Up front, the scope has a 56mm front objective and a 34mm tube. This allows the scope in to get plenty of light, and the 34mm tube will allow for a good amount of elevation and windage adjustment. In the box, you'll also find an included sunshade, which is becoming less and less common to find with scopes in this price range. Now, the tube allows for 85 MOA, or just about 25 mils of internal elevation adjustment. This means that with a 100-yard zero and something like a 6.5 Creedmoor, with a flat base, you should be able to dial in for about 1200 yards. You can, and you probably should, get a canted scope base, especially if you're shooting with an AR, and that's going to give you an additional 20, 30, or 40 MOA, and of course the simpler solution is to simply use the holdovers in the reticle. With a 30 MOA base, you're going to be able to get out to 1500 yards or so, and then using the additional 10 mil hash marks in a reticle, you'll be able to hold out past 1800 yards. The turrets themselves are quite nice, and unlike many of its competitors, the turrets on the Venom are short and wide versus tall and skinny. As a result, you have 10 mils of elevation adjustment per rotation in 0.1 mil increments versus 6 mils or 8 mils in competing scopes. I personally like this, as doing math in 10s is easier than doing math in 6s and 8s. Even though the Venom is a cheaper scope than the Strike Eagle, I find the turret feel on the Venom to be quite a bit nicer than the Strike Eagle. Now, while I found the Strike Eagle turrets both mushy and a bit sloppy in between the detents, the Venom turrets are super tactile, they're quite audible, and they're quite precise between the detents with only a minute amount of slop between them. Now, while these are certainly not turrets that you're going to find in the Vortex Razors, the Leupold Mark Vs, or more expensive European scopes, these are excellent for Chinesium scopes and probably only second best to those found in the Element Titan, which is a few $100s more than this. Now, the scope does have a zero stop, which lets you get back quickly to zero without having to look at the dial. This is the same rev stop zero system as we find in the Strike Eagle, and it does eat up a bit of internal elevation adjustment if you use it. Now, if you use it, it would drop the internal elevation adjustment from 25 mils down to 18, and of course, you don't actually have to use it. So, how is the image quality? The image quality is really good for the price point, especially considering the street price in the competition. While I no longer have the Strike Eagle, the image quality seems to be the same, which is needless to say very good for the money. Out to 300 yards or so, you should have absolutely no issues distinguishing between bullet holes, and you'll be able to see individual hits on steel out to 600 or 700 yards. The image quality with the scope is nice, bright, and vibrant, and there are no major color shifts. The sharpness is also pretty good, and it's far better than what you find in the Diamondback. Of course, this is a $500 scope and not a $2,000 scope. As we typically find here, once you crack the zoom past 20 power and approach 25 magnification, the scope does start to lose brightness and clarity. Furthermore, at full magnification, you do start seeing a little bit of distortion around the edge. Do note that any through the scope footage you see on any scope does not tell you the full picture, as you're losing a significant amount of resolution and clarity with the camera you're recording with. So take it all with a grain of salt, and ultimately you want to make sure that you look through the scope yourself. Bottom line, and is the Vortex Venom right for you? The Vortex Venom is a very welcome scope to the already crowded low to mid-price precision rifle market, and is certainly a scope I would recommend. While Vortex set up the Strike Eagle as that beautiful jab, the Venom is that vicious jab cross to others competing at that $500 price point. This scope delivers precisely what long-range shooters need with none of the frills. With the Venom, you have great image quality for the money, and it'll absolutely please anyone who's buying their first precision rifle, or others who are upgrading from those $200 to $400 scopes. You have a front focal plane reticle that gives you holdovers, and it's usable throughout the entire magnification range. It's not super busy, and certainly won't overwhelm a gun owner buying their first Christmas tree style reticle. This is definitely not a Tremor 3, H59, or any of the new reticles that Primary Arms is putting out. And of course, you get a functional zero stop. Best of all, however, and what will be a big point of differentiation, is that Venom is backed by Vortex and their lifetime warranty, the leader in the space. And while most scopes will now come with a lifetime warranty, very few have the support structure or infrastructure of Vortex. What you're not getting are a couple of nice to haves that you find in a Strike Eagle, like locking turrets or an illuminated reticle. While I personally would not mind having locking turrets, I seldom use the illumination on any of my reticles that have them. You should seriously consider this scope if you're looking for a good front focal plane reticle rifle scope to take you out to that 1,000-yard shot on steel, or you know you need a decent scope but are afraid to commit $1,000 or more on something that you don't know whether you would like or not. The Venom won't hold back a beginner and will allow you to determine your preferences for what is a must-have on your high-end optic. You should look elsewhere if you absolutely need an illuminated reticle or you need that additional 25 MOA worth of internal elevation adjustment. A good example of this would be NRL 22 or long-range rimfire shooting, where that additional 25 MOA will allow you to dial into 300 yards or more, and what you saw me do with the Element Titan. So that is the brand new Vortex Venom 5-25 front focal plane rifle scope and what you need to know in 8 minutes or less. I'm sure we will soon have a detailed comparison of the scope versus both the Vortex Diamondback and the Strike Eagle and the cult favorites, including the Arkin SH4 and a couple others. If you're interested in the scope, go ahead and check out the complete optics playlist down here. And if you've seen our videos more than a couple of times and you're still not subscribed, what the heck are you waiting for? Click that button and the bell icon to receive up-to-date notifications on our latest videos, including the follow-up to this scope. As always, I appreciate you watching, keep on squatting, and I'll see you in the next video.